Are you like me and can remember that you saw a movie, who was in it, what happened, but the minute that someone asks you, what year did it come out, you kind of freeze up like someone asked you to do long division on paper right in front of you, right there at that very second? Unless you're very good at long division on paper, then that analogy doesn't apply to you. Anyway, that's why I'm started this new series here on the podcast. Kind of did it back in January, and I completely missed out on it all of February. Now we're pretty much at the end of March, and I'm almost done with that too. But this is a new feature where we kind of take a deeper, not necessarily deeper, but at least a closer look at some of the big movies that came out that year in Monthly Rewind. That's what the feature is called. It's called Monthly Rewind. I'm doing a version of this on my WordPress account where I give small thoughts on almost all the movies that I've seen for that month and that year. Although the WordPress account version is a decade-based set, so it's from the decade that just ended. Here I'll be taking a little bit more where I'll be doing movies that came out all the way in 2000 to 2018. So that's obviously we just went through 2019. We're now in 2020. So I'll be taking a look at some of those movies. I will throw some stinkers in there just for the fun of it. But for the most part, this feature ranges from the movies that came out in 2000 to the movies that came out in 2018. So I've been putting this kind of list together for a little bit, mainly because I wanted to do a new feature for the podcast. Have these podcasts ready, releasing them probably on days where I don't have a podcast. I'm recording this particular one during the coronavirus pandemic that's going on right now. So this may or may not take over the podcast for a couple of weeks, depending on how movie news gets filtered out through all of this. So we'll see, but I am going to be recording these a little bit early, a little bit ahead of time, so I can get these out. But I wanted to start off doing this. I've been working really. I worked a little hard on this, so I don't want to just like let it go by the wayside and not have anything for it. So let's do it. Let's get to the monthly rewind for the months. This is going to be a double collection, so this will be February and March. So let's start off with February. Obviously, like I mentioned, we're going to go from 2000 to 2018. I picked just a few movies from I try to pick a few movies from every year, just the movies that really stuck out to me that year. So sometimes there's only one movie. Sometimes there's no movie. Sometimes there's three. Sometimes there's four. Sometimes there's two. So just go with me. I won't try to, make it too long because, no one wants that. So we're going to start with February of 2000. I only got one movie for that year, and that is Pitch Black. It's the movie with Vin Diesel. It was kind of one of his first lead roles. This was after he had done The Iron Giant. He did a movie called Boiler Room, and this was before The Fast and the Furious. So people kind of already knew who he was going into Fast. And of course he had that small role, I should say, in Saving Private Ryan. But this was kind of his first quote-unquote lead roles, even though he was one of the antagonistic forces in the movie. And those of you who don't remember what Pitch Black was it follows a group in a commercial transport ship that gets stuck on a planet, and then they learn that there's deadly creatures out there that only come out at night. It's filled with a bunch of different people, and Riddick, the Vin Diesel character, happens to be one of the people on the ship. And he happens to be a known killer, and one of the people on board are like is a U.S. Marshal who's transporting him. So it's really good. The effects are just a tiny bit dated, but it's really cool to see these just different groups of people coming together and having this kind of weird filter horror movie, especially with a very early onset Vin Diesel. It's pretty interesting, and of course the movie spawned a few sequels. It spawned The Chronicles of Riddick. It spawned the third movie, which was called Riddick. It had a few animated movies. Riddick was one of those very early on characters from Vin Diesel that everyone really liked. And he played the character really, really well, so I don't blame them for that. All right, so let's move on to 2001. I only have, again, only one movie, and that was Hannibal. Some of these will be self-explanatory as to why I picked those movies and why these movies have an impact on me, whether it was just as a movie lover, or whether it was someone, before I got into the whole, process of filmmaking and all that stuff. So Hannibal's pretty much self-explanatory. Some of these will be self-explanatory. Some of these won't. Some of these I'll go into a little bit just for the hell of it. So 2002, I only got one movie again. Like I mentioned, I'm going to throw a few stinkers in here. This one is Rollerball. It's a remake of the 1975 film. It starred Chris Klein, LL Cool J, Rebecca Romijn, who was known as Rebecca Romijn Stamos back then, and Jean Reno. It was weirdly directed by John McTiernan, who had done Predator, Die Hard with a Vengeance as well, The Hunt for Red October, Last Action Hero, The Thomas Crown Affair. So he had done all these great movies, and then he did The 13th Warrior, which was the Antonio Banderas movie that was, I guess, partially inspired by Beowulf. I don't really remember the movie that well. I do remember not liking it, but I think that was more a product of company interference, studio interference for the most part. And then he did Rollerball, and then he did Basic, which was the John Travolta movie that no one remembers. So Rollerball, it was supposed to tell the future, and this movie came out in 2002. The movie is set in 2005, so it's not a too distant future, but it's a very different future than what we saw back in the day. Anyway, it's mainly about these people who are participants in the violent sport of rollerball, which is the big sport and thing to watch back then. Kind of a ripoff of The Running Man, basically, but it's just so bad. It is just so bad. Like, I haven't watched it in years, but I remember watching it back then, and I knew this movie was not good. And this was when they were trying to make Chris Klein an action hero, I guess. They were trying to make him a star. Pretty sure he's coming off American Pie at this point. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, it's not good whatsoever. So let's move on to 2003. We got two movies there. We got Old School, which is, of course, the movie that everyone really quotes a lot of the time. Everyone quotes Will Ferrell's, Blue. So he's in there. You got Vince Vaughn in there. You got Jeremy Piven in there. You got Luke Wilson in there. This is one of the early movies directed by Todd Phillips. I forgot where it lands on his filmography, but this was directed by Todd Phillips before he started doing the Hangover movies. Way before he started doing the Hangover movies. And then the other movie is Daredevil. Now, I put Daredevil on the list for a few reasons. Daredevil gets a lot of hate. And of course, I'm talking about the Ben Affleck one, with Jennifer Gardner and Colin Farrell. Joe Pantoliano's in there. He plays Ben Urich. Jon Favreau's in there as well. He plays Foggy. And the late Michael Clark Duncan in there. He plays the Kingpin. And this movie gets a lot of hate. And for the most part, it's somewhat deserved. It's not a very good movie. They released the director's cut or the unrated cut, whatever it was, whatever label they ended up putting it on there, and it was a little bit better. But of course, we're basing all of this off the theater cut for the most part, and the theater cut we got was not very good. It is not a great movie. Was Ben Affleck miscast? I don't know. I've seen bits of it afterwards. I haven't seen the whole thing in one sitting in a while. The Colin Farrell bullseye interpretation is really weird. I did like Michael Clark Duncan as the Kingpin. I thought that was really cool. And the Jennifer Garner as Elektra, even now it seems a little weird because I just don't, I'm pretty sure this was around the time of Alias. So I think maybe they're just kind of capitalizing on that. But when I think of Elektra, I don't think of Jennifer Gardner. But I don't know, whatever. So the movie gets a lot of hate. It's not that bad. And a lot of people put the blame on Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck at that point was not the Ben Affleck that we know today. He was not the writer. He was not the producer. He was not the director that we knew. He was just an actor making his way through the acting world. He was being told what to do. He wasn't being, Ben Affleck that we know today. So just wanted to put my, not my love for Daredevil out there, but just my competence for Daredevil, I guess. It's probably not the word I wanted to use. Moving on. No 2004 movies. So let's move on to 2005, where I have three. Three. I forgot what I wrote. So the first one is Ong Bak, which was the movie that pretty much introduced the world to Tony Jaa and arguably Muay Thai. I think people knew Muay Thai at that point, but the way Tony Jaa did Muay Thai, I think, was a little different from what we have seen. So I picked that because the movie blew me away. The action scenes were just really awesome. I saw it in a small movie theater, like I think it was like a Thursday night or a Friday night, maybe. There wasn't that many people there. It was like me, my brother, my mom, and like maybe 4 other people, maybe 5 other people in that theater. But we all really enjoyed it when we walked out of it. So it was really cool. So Ong Bak, I have Constantine, which is the Keanu Reeves movie, which I know has a lot of love, and I think if anyone, I think there's enough. I think it's kind of gotten a little bit more of an appreciation lately because of Keanu Reeves and the renaissance he's gone through. Everyone's kind of gone back and looked at his old movies, and I think Constantine is getting just a little bit of more love. I really liked it when it came out anyway. It's one of those movies that I really enjoyed. I think it was one of those movies that was kind of underappreciated when it came out, and it's definitely a movie that I would love to see a sequel to, and I know Keanu Reeves would want us to do a sequel. He's talked about it already, so we'll see what happens with that, if anything. And the last one is Cursed, directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson, they basically Scream. They did Scream together. It starred Christina Ricci. I don't know why I started saying different name. It starred Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg as a brother and sister who were attacked by a werewolf and eventually learn they are becoming werewolves themselves, and and it's basically kind of their journey of how to stop it from happening. They don't want to become werewolves, so they're trying to stop themselves. It co-starred Joshua Jackson, and Judy Greer is in there as well. It's a bunch of other people as well. But this movie was plagued by production and script issues. The movie was delayed a year, and when they came back after that year, like filming-wise, it wasn't like, not release-wise, I mean release-wise too, but filming-wise, it was delayed a year because of production issues, because of constant rewrites, and because of Harvey Weinstein. Was it Harvey Weinstein or was this his brother? It was one of the Weinsteins, and Miramax. It was probably Harvey because he was the kind of he's always been the main one in charge. Miramax, I'll just say Miramax at this point. Miramax ordered the movie to be reshot. A lot of the movie to be reshot. About half the movie was reshot. And when they went back to film, not everyone was available to come back. So what they ended up doing was recasting a lot of people, or simply cutting a lot of people out of the movie. And on top of that, Rick Baker, of course, the legendary practical effects wizard, he did the practical effects for the werewolves in the movie. But when they came back for the reshoots, and for the continuation of filming, basically, these effects were lost. So they kind of lost everything, or they also did not bring him back. I don't know if they didn't bring him back for other reasons or because he was doing something else, but they couldn't bring him back. So his effects were also lost, and they bought in K&B, which is another big practical effects studio in Hollywood. And they took over with new effects, and they didn't really come up to par. They had to put a lot of CGI on it, and it's a reason why there's not a lot of full versions of the wolf or the werewolves that you see in the movies, because they kind of lost everything, or when they had to go back and reshoot stuff, they had a bunch of CGI, and they didn't want it to look too CGI, so they ended up just showing like little pieces of the werewolf. So it was really weird. This movie was cut up to pieces, and unfortunately, it sucked. It wasn't very good, which sucked because first of all, this movie also, like I mentioned, went through a lot of changes. So originally, Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg were not brother and sister. They were just, the whole movie was supposed to be about 3 strangers. So Christina Ricci was going to play one, Jesse Eisenberg was going to play another one, and Skeet Ulrich was going to play another one. Of course, Skeet had already done Scream with Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson. And then I don't even think Urick's in the movie. I think they cut him out, or he wasn't available for anything. So they kind of changed everything at the last second. So there's like 3 movies that are supposedly out there. There's the original version. There's the original version with the Rick Baker effects, the one they all shot. There's the version that they did with the unfinished. It's an unfinished cut, so there's a lot of everything's not really properly lit or stuff like that. And then there's another version. I forgot what the other version is. So there's 3 versions of the movie out there, and Wes Craven apparently was a very big proponent of trying to get one of if not all 3, at least one of his versions out into the world. But the people who owned the movie at that point didn't want to do it. So there's 3 versions of Wes Craven's only werewolf movie out there on a shelf somewhere probably, and no one knows what's happening with them. So there you go. 2006, there wasn't anything that so there's that. 2007, there's one movie, and it's Ghost Rider. I did not like Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is one of those movies that if anyone asks me what is one of my most disliked movies ever, or what is a movie that I just don't care about, it's gonna be Ghost Rider. It's from the same guy who directed Daredevil, so maybe there's that. And he also directed Elektra, I believe. Yeah. So it's Mark Steven Johnson. Nick Cage, of course, played Johnny Blaze, aka the Ghost Rider. Eva Mendes was in there. Peter Fonda was in there. He basically plays the devil in the movie. And then there's Wes Bentley, who plays Blackheart, which is a disgrace because that was not Blackheart. That was an emo, very weak Blackheart, not the Blackheart that everyone knows and loves and is a huge fan of. I don't know what kind of Blackheart that was, but it wasn't the Blackheart that we all know and love. I was hyped for this movie. This is one of the first movies that I can really remember being really hyped for. And I really didn't know too much about Ghost Rider, the character. I had just kind of started getting to know him when I found out that a movie was being made. So I wasn't reading too much about him, but I knew who he was. And when I found out they were doing a movie, when I saw the trailer, I thought the trailer looked cool. You know, there was that shot in the trailer where he's riding up a building and it looks like he's gonna fall off, and then he whips his chain around and he like kind of grabs onto the building and rides up the building again. I thought that looked really, really cool. I thought that looked awesome. That little old me was like, that's so cool. But then the movie came out and it just, oh my God. It wasn't good. It was not good whatsoever. And I didn't even see the sequel, to be honest with you. So I don't know if the sequel's any better, which I don't think so from the sounds of it. So I don't know. Whatever. Let's move on. 2008. I only got one movie for 2008 again. And that is I got 2 movies from 2008. So I got 2 movies for 2008, and the first one is Step Up to the Streets. I did not watch the first Step Up movie. I ended up watching the Step Up to the Streets. I think kind of like the last second. I don't even think I saw it in theaters. I think I saw it as soon as it came out on DVD at that point. And the only reason I watched it was because my brother watched it. And my brother actually went to USC, where the director of the movie, John M. Cho, went to USC. And apparently they were classmates in one of my brother's classes. So my brother was a classmate of John M. Chu, which I thought was really, really cool. And I think he was just kind of just supporting him in a lot of ways. So he kind of went and supported him, and he ended up liking it. And he kind of took me with him. And I you know what, the Step Up movies, they're pretty much, the kind of basic, we gotta, what's the phrase? I hear it all the time on junk food cinema, Save the Rec Center kind of movies, where everyone kind of bands together to save a building or a rec center, which was a big thing in the 80s and 70s. But I really like Step Up to the Streets. I don't know what it is. Like I just really like it. I don't know. I like the dance moves. What more can I say? But the second movie in 2008 was In Bruges, which was directed by Martin McDowell, who directed Seven Psychopaths. He also directed Three Billboards for Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and it starred Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson as two hitmen, who, after a job goes wrong, they're sent to Bruges in Belgium to hide out to kind of, see what's going to happen. And their boss is played by Ralph Fiennes. It's one of the first movies that I remember. I think it's one of the first movies that I can remember it, and knowing it wasn't a full-fledged comedy. It was more of the dark humor, like black comedies. It was kind of one of the first movies where I realized that's what it was. Like that In Bruges was the movie that, at least from what I can remember, was when I started understanding the concept of black comedies, of dark humor. And I really liked it. I liked the relationship between Farrell and Gleeson. I thought it was really great. It kind of surprised me a little bit. I didn't really know what to expect out of the movie at all, what was going to happen to all the characters and stuff. So I really ended up liking In Bruges. And it's one of those movies where anytime I see it on TV, I don't see it on TV very often, but every time I do, I end up watching it because I really enjoy that movie a lot. All right, let's move on to 2009, unfortunately. And it is Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. It starred Kirsten Cook, who was coming off Smallville at that point, playing Chun, or I think she was still in, I think she did it in between seasons. She played Chun-Li, who in the movie witnesses her father getting kidnapped as a teenager, and when she grows up, she seeks the man responsible, who in the movie is a wealthy crime lord, played by Neil McDowell, who of course plays Bison. The movie co-starred Chris Klein. It was Chris Klein again, playing Charlie, and he will remind you every 10 minutes who he is. Robin Cho's in there as well, aka Liu Kang, but he's playing Jen in the movie, or Gen, however you want to pronounce it. Moon Blundgood is in the movie as well. Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas. I think this was his feature film. He played Vega, and the late Michael Clark Duncan, who was back in the picture. He plays Balrog in the movie. I did not like this movie whatsoever. I thought it was not good. I think it actually came out on my birthday, or around my birthday. So my brother and I went like in the middle of the week to go watch it, and I regretted every minute of it. It is not a good movie. It's not. It frustrated me how the movie was. I mean, first of all, don't get me wrong, I think the concept of it was good. I think if they were going to start, doing these Street Fighter movies, and they were going to start doing them by introducing characters maybe every now and then, and they wanted to start with Chun-Li, who of course is one of, the most popular characters in Street Fighter, I was fine with that. I thought Kirsten Kirk, when I first found out she was playing Chun-Li, I didn't like it because I wasn't a big fan of Smallville. I wasn't a really big fan of her. And then, I realized, and like, it's all right, whatever, let's go watch it. Robin Shaw was in it. I was like, okay, great. That's great. Michael Clark Duncan was in it. I really like Michael Clark Duncan. But it wasn't good. It's terrible. It is terribly written. There is a line in the movie that everyone kind of brings up every time or a scene in the movie that every time someone brings up this movie, they bring up that scene that involves Chris Klein. And Chris Klein is trying way too hard in this movie to be very deadly serious, and it shows. Like, I think he wanted to like just go full on in, like, campy, and he was the only one in on it. It just wasn't good, man. I mean, I wouldn't even recommend it to anybody. It's one of those movies, there are movies every now and then where I don't like. I was like, you know what, you should watch it, because I didn't like it. It probably wasn't for me. I would not recommend Chun-Li, Legend of Chun-Li, to anyone, because it is not good at all. Okay, let's move on from that to 2010, and I got three movies. The first one is The Crazies, which was a remake of the John Carpenter 1973 film. This remake stars Timothy Olyphant, Rhonda Mitchell, Danielle Pennebaker, Joe Anderson. I still haven't watched, actually, now that I think about it, the original Crazies. But I really like the remake. I think the remake's really good. I think it's one of the very few remakes out there, one of the handful of remakes out there that people actually enjoy. I really like it. I don't know what it was about it. It didn't overplay its hand. It knew what it was. It wasn't trying to do something drastically different. There's a lot of great imagery in there. There's got a lot of great shots in there. I just really like it. I think it's really good. And I like Timothy Olyphant, so I mean that may be a reason. So the next one is Shutter Island. Of course, that was a movie directed by Martin Scorsese and starred Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone, talks about the movie and talks about the ending. The ending is the only thing. You bring up anything about Shutter Island, the first thing everyone's going to talk about is the ending. Because the ending is one of those endings that is still, even to this day, debated. Is he in on it? Is he not in on it? Did it work? Did it not work? Did he do it on his own free will? Didn't he? It's just one of those things where it still is a mystery to me that the ending is still talked about to the day. I have my opinion on the ending. I think he knew what he was doing. I think he knew what he knew. He knew, and he was okay with what was going to happen to him. That was my opinion on it. Even back then, I kind of knew. Even then, back then, I knew, he knew. He knows. He knows that he's sick, and he knows what he's doing, and he'd rather take that so he can forget than have the memory of what he did. So there's that. And then the final movie in 2010 is The Wolfman. That was directed by Joe Johnston, who, of course, directed the Captain America movie, at least the first one. And that starred Benicio del Toro as the Wolfman himself. Emily Blunt's also in there. Hugo Weaving's in there, as is Anthony Hopkins. Rick Baker did the practical effects. He did basically the effects for the Wolfman, which is arguably the best thing about the movie. When you kind of think about it, yeah, I mean, that's the best thing about the movie, really. I thought the Wolfman was okay. It's kind of bland. It's kind of boring, to be honest, in a lot of places, which is kind of a shame. I mean, I just read out the cast for you guys. Benicio del Toro, he's a pretty decent choice for Lawrence, aka the Wolfman. Emily Blunt's in there. This is before she kind of blew up and everything and became the Emily Blunt that we all know. I mean, she was always the Emily Blunt that we all knew, but this is before she kind of, started being in a lot of stuff. Hugo Weaving, of course, and then Anthony Hopkins in there as well. It's just one of those weird movies. It's really boring, and then when everything kind of finally picks up, it's not until the last half hour of the movie, and by that point you're kind of just already checked out. The practical effects in this movie are great, and that's really the only kind of saving grace of the movie, if there is one, is the practical effects. And then the transformation scene, which again, they wait until the final half hour of the movie to finally give you the full transformation scene. Every time he transforms to the Wolfman, it's always a little part, or you don't really fully see it. And I get that approach. They do it with Jaws, and they do it with a lot of monster movies where they don't give you everything. They give you little tidbits, which is great, and I appreciate that, because I think that's really cool. I mean, you don't want to see the monster all the time, and I get that, I really do, but at least make the movie exciting before that. And that was the problem with the Wolfman. It wasn't really that exciting beforehand, and you kind of got that little, you kind of got bored a little bit. So I don't mind, monster movie, make it exciting. Don't show us everything. That's fine. You want to wait to the end to fully show everything and it's all in all its glory. That's great. Just make the movie interesting and make the movie not boring before you get to that point. All right, let's move on to 2011. And this is where you'll notice that there's no echo anymore. I am recording this second part of this little podcast right here in a different room, in a completely different space, not at work. This is recording way after I recorded this, maybe 2 weeks afterwards. So we've been quarantined for a while. A lot of movies have been delayed, so I apologize for the potentially long podcast this will be, but also for the change in audio since then. So I apologize for that. But let's continue on, nonetheless, to 2011. where I have only two movies. The first one is I Saw the Devil. That is the South Korean, I should say, not North Korean, so this South Korean kind of crime thriller. If you don't know anything about it, I think the less you know, the better. But it's basically about a agent whose fiance was murdered by a notorious killer, and takes revenge in his own, let's say, sadistic way. And this is one of those movies, again, where I just mentioned the less you know, the better. Not a lot of movies live up to that expectation or that motto, but I Saw the Devil is definitely one of those. The less you know, the better it is, for your first viewing experience. So that's all I will say about that. It's very good. Highly recommend it. It is a bit long, a bit longer than I thought it would be, especially for this kind of movie, but it helps with the tone and kind of what the subject matter is. So there's that. All right. So the second movie in 2011 is Drive Angry. This is the Nicolas Cage movie where he plays a character named John Milton. And if you watch the whole movie, you will know why. His last name is Milton. He is a vengeful father who escapes from hell, or I just read the synopsis, and chases after the men who killed his daughter and kidnapped his granddaughter. He is also being chased himself by a mysterious character called the Accountant, played by William Fichtner. Co-stars Amber Heard, Billy Burke. It's also directed by Patrick Lussier, who directed My Bloody Valentine 3D, which I was also a fan of. And it was back in the boom. The movie came out back in the boom of movies, I would say 2011, 2010, where everything was filmed in 3D instead of being converted afterwards to 3D to save some money. So when the 3D happens, it actually looks cooler. It's more smoother. You can tell that it was probably filmed in 3D. It's one of those really cheesy movies. Yes, it has Nicolas Cage in it. I think Bloody Disgusting ran an interview with Patrick Lussier on a multitude of things, and Drive Angry was one of them. And he originally wanted like these very older stars in the movie, and then he ended up with Nicolas Cage instead. And it's one of those really cheesy movies. It's very kind of B movie-esque, kind of has this very grindhouse feel to it. But I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it to this day. And there's a line in the movie that I always love, and I find myself, kind of repeating it every now and then. At one point, it's kind of near the end of the movie, but at one point, William Fichtner finally catches up to Nicolas Cage's character, and he asks him, and he kind of tells him, the devil's not going to like what you did. And Nicolas Cage, in the very Nicolas Cage way, says, what's he going to do? Not let me back in? Which I just love. I don't know what it was about that line. I just really like it. But do yourself a favor. If you're going to watch any Nicolas Cage movie post, let's just say 90s, this one would definitely be on that list. This would be on the top of the list, because I don't know, I just really like Drive Angry. I don't know what it was. I like it. And if you need any other reason, Amber Heard's in it. She wears very short shorts throughout the whole movie. So there you go. All right, so let's move on to 2012. Also have two movies there. The first one is Goon. This is the Sean William Scott movie where he plays a bouncer who gets looked down upon by his family and then joins a semi-pro hockey team up in Canada, and he becomes the team's goon, which is basically the person that goes around and starts fights. It's very good. I watched this at the no longer running film festival Action Fest. It ran over in North Carolina, or down in North Carolina, I should say. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny. I thought him and Jay Baruchel, who's in the movie, he also co-wrote the movie, which was really cool. I think they did a really good job with it. It's one of those kind of quirky, out there comedies. It's not going to be for everyone. Even the comedy every now and especially now, it's kind of just, it's like, oh, okay, like that was funny back in 2012. It's not funny anymore. But it's relatively good. It's not the most typical Sean William Scott that you've seen out there, but I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. I know there is a sequel. I haven't watched it yet. I heard some mixed things about it, but there you go. All right, so the second movie in 2012 is Chronicle. Now, this movie has its own little problems, especially now with, you know, being written by Max Landis, who has his own problems, and he's a scumbag, and director Josh Trank, who, of course, went on to direct Fantastic Four and all the behind-the-scenes issues that came up after that. But Chronicle, for those of you not familiar or maybe forgot, it follows three high school friends played by Alex Russell, Dan DeHaan, and this was Dan DeHaan's breakout role. Hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. And Michael B. Jordan. I forgot Michael B. Jordan was the third friend. I knew there was a third friend. I knew he was a black actor. I couldn't remember who it was, and then I looked it up and it was Michael B. Jordan. But they get superpowers after discovering something in an underground cave, and of course things get out of hand and bonds are tested from the three friends. And this was one of those movies, when it came out, everyone was talking about it. And I think the reason why everyone was talking about it is back then, you know, this was around the boom of the comic book movies, the Marvel movies getting really popular, and going into full swing at that point. And this was a movie that was quote unquote grounded in its approach. It was a found footage style movie. It followed these three friends who have pretty great chemistry with each other. It's from a new director that no one really knew about. The marketing campaign was on point. Max Landis' name was attached to it, and of course he's the son of John Landis. So this movie had a lot of things going for it. And when it came out, it, you know, made a pretty positive impression with people, especially, you know, in the DVD crowd and the Blu-ray crowd. And it became really popular. And it's still one of those movies that everyone, you know, when they want to take a more deep dive into the comic book genre and they talk about, you know, movies that aren't the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they talk about Chronicle. Maybe not so much anymore because of, again, the allegations against Max Landis and how Josh Trank has kind of become now a joke and now kind of a sign of, you know, what happens when fame gets to your head kind of ordeal. But back then, Chronicle was very good. And of course, everyone remembers the spider leg scene and kind of the crazy third act of the movie. And of course, there was always comparisons to Akira at that point. And even to this day, there's still comparisons to Akira. But it's interesting to see how Chronicle was at the peak of what it was. And nowadays, no one really talks about it too much because of Max Landis. But Chronicle back then left a very good impression on a lot of people, especially me. All right, so let's move on to 2013. I only have one movie in 2013. And it's one of those movies I was hesitant about putting on the list, but I figured I'd put it on the list just because I was surprised of how not bad it was, I guess. Warm Bodies, which is based off the book of the same name, I believe, by Isaac Marin. And of course, itself is based off the idea of Romeo and Juliet, except Romeo in this case is a zombie and Juliet is a living girl who lives in a walled off city, and it's interesting. I use that term a lot, I know, but Warm Bodies is one of those movies where I watched the trailer and I didn't really think I'd go watch it. And then, you know, it was a Friday night. I didn't want to stay at home. My brother didn't want to stay at home, and we went to go watch the movie, and we really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Nicholas Hoult plays the zombie. Teresa Palmer plays the girl. Rob Corddry's in it. Dave Franco's in it for a little bit, and John Malkovich is in it as well. He plays the father of Teresa Palmer, or I don't think it's the father. I think he's the father of the boyfriend, who's Dave Franco. He's in it. He basically plays the bad guy in the movie, but he's not in it for a lot. If you're looking for a John Malkovich kick. But I did think it was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. The chemistry, even though Nicholas Hoult doesn't really talk that much in the movie, is really good with Teresa Palmer. So it's a fun little movie. It's one of those movies, if you haven't watched it yet, this would be the perfect time to watch it because you're not going anywhere. So yeah, I'd recommend warm bodies, I guess. I only got one movie in 2014, which is the Lego Movie, which I don't really have to say too much about it. I think we were all surprised by the Lego Movie at that point. So yeah, and still to this day, it's still very, very good. So the Lego Movie is my next pick. 2015 also have only one movie, and that is actually no, I have two movies. Sorry, Kingsman: The Secret Service. You know, a surprise, another movie that surprised a lot of people, kind of making fun of the James Bond and the spy action film genre, which I really enjoyed. Taron Egerton was the standout in that. Arguably was a standout in it. I mean, that was his breakout role. Of course, Colin Firth's also in there in a role that I don't think anyone saw him playing, but he was in there. And of course, the church scene being the big standout in that. The next movie in 2015 is What We Do in the Shadows, and that was of course directed and written by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, who also appears in the movie. Taika, anyway, Waititi. It follows vampires in modern day being recorded like in a documentary style. I admittedly did not watch this right away. I saw it like a few years afterwards, but I really loved it. I thought it was really fun. The humor is probably something that you'll have to get used to if you're not kind of used to that humor a little bit. But this is really, really fun. And it's a really fun movie. It's a really good movie. It's a comedy. It does have every now and then kind of little horror aspects in it, but for the most part, it is a comedy about vampires. Of course, I got a spin-off of a TV series, which is also very good. If you haven't watched that yet, I highly recommend it. It's only got one season. Season 2 starts up in a couple weeks, at least at the time of this recording. So that's really cool if you want to go. I would highly recommend What We Do in the Shadows if you have not watched it yet. 2016, only two movies, Deadpool and The Witch. My first review for the podcast was The Witch, and I, to this day, still really like it. I think what they were able to do with that, it does feel like you were watching something you weren't supposed to watch, which is not when I heard that little blurb online somewhere. I was like, that's okay. And then I watched it, I was like, no, they're right. That blurb is right. So yeah, The Witch, and of course Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds finally getting his Deadpool movie, and it came out, and it was actually pretty fun. It was pretty cool. 2017, three movies here. The Lego Batman movie, not really much to say there other than it was really, really good. I thought it was a pretty good love letter to the Batman character. Of course, it could have been, there could have been more stuff in there Batman lore wise, but I think it's deep down it gets to it. John Wick Chapter 2. Just John Wick being John Wick, Keanu Reeves coming back, shooting up a lot of people. I mean, what more can you want? And then, of course, Get Out. I don't think there's a lot more to say about Get Out that hasn't already been said. Jordan Peele's directorial debut blew everyone out of the water. It was one of the movies where I was in a theater that was filled with people that I knew would probably be really rowdy, but thankfully they were only rowdy during the parts where you would expect people to be rowdy. And it was a really fun experience to watch that in that theater. And then finally, 2018, we finally reached the end of February. I got four movies, I should say. Black Panther, of course, Marvel's big ambitious film in the recent phase. That was also a movie that was jam-packed in my theater that a lot of people really loved, and I liked it. I didn't love it, I liked it, but I thought what they were able to do, and what they did, I should say, what they ended up doing with Black Panther was pretty cool, and it was pretty awesome. Annihilation is the other one. Annihilation is really hard to talk about because it's one of those movies where if you can take one interpretation of it, you can take another interpretation of it. And then if you take both of those interpretations and combine them together, they still somehow make sense about this movie. But it is one of those movies. I know it's based off a series, a book series, a trilogy, I should say. And I just really liked it. I don't know what it was. And I liked it. Even though it's one of those movies where you may not understand it completely right away. It does lend itself to being rewatched. So you can watch some things maybe you didn't catch the first time, but I did like it. I thought it was very good. I thought it was very well made. The next one is Operation Red Sea, which was a foreign movie that I really watched and enjoyed. If you want to watch a kind of like a 2 hour plus movie of pure action, Operation Red Sea is that movie. I believe it's on one of the streaming services. It might be on Netflix from what I can remember. But yeah, go watch Operation Red Sea. It's very good, especially if you're an action junkie. Finally, the last movie in 2018 is Game Night. This is one of those movies that's really, really surprised me. I didn't know what to expect from it. I thought it would be funny. Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams, Kyle Chandler, Lamar Morris, Billy Magnuson, which is probably the big surprise there. Jesse Plemons, of course, amongst many others in that movie as well. It's really good. I remember not laughing as hard during a comedy movie out loud in a movie theater for a long time before I watched Game Night. And I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's very, very good. So Game Night. Can I highly recommend Game Night? It's very, very good. All right, so that's all of February. I'm not going to repeat them all because that's just ridiculous. I already did that. So let's just move on to March. I don't want to make this podcast again too long. So let's move on to the monthly rewind of March. All right, so let's start off with 2000. The first one is Final Destination. The first one, that's when the first one came out. And was still going up until a few years ago, and now they're making a reboot, a remake. I forget how they classified it. That's coming out maybe sometime next year, or maybe the year after, something like that. It's kind of hard to tell now because of everything going on. But the first Final Destination came out in 2000, and it was one of those movies where you watched it for the first time and you're like, I'm never getting on a plane again. And it's just it's one of those dumb, fun little horror movies. I thought it was really cool. So 2001, we have the first Spy Kids movie, and I don't care what anyone says. The first Spy Kids movie, thoroughly enjoyable. If it's just one of those fun family movies, and this was done right for me. I was right at that perfect age of watching the first Spy Kids movie, and it was definitely for me. And then the next movie in 2001 is Christopher Nolan's Memento. That was one it took a very long time for me to watch as well. I don't think I watched it until high school, but it was still very, very good. I loved it. It was one of those movies where you watch it, especially for me, where I watched it, I was like, I need to watch this again because I need to kind of piece everything together. But it's very, very good. It's very well done. Maybe arguably one of Nolan's best. So we'll go with that. 2002, we have two movies. We have Blade 2, which I think is probably the best Blade movie of the three. I still am kind of a fan of Blade Trinity, but we'll save that for later. But Blade 2, very, very good. I watch it pretty much anytime it's on TV, no matter where it is. Like I watch it. So that should tell you how much I love Blade 2. Resident Evil, the first one. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with the Resident Evil movies. So do I. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I don't have problems with the Resident Evil franchise, especially the later ones. But the first one, for what it is, for what it's trying to do, for what it's trying to, for the story it's trying to tell, I thought it was fine. I still stand by the first Resident Evil being probably the best Resident Evil movie, which again, when you look at the later movies, isn't really saying much, but I kind of really like the first Resident Evil movie. So if that notches some points off me, then okay. I'm okay with that. 2003, The Core. Again, another dumb, fun sci-fi movie in the early 2000s. If you have not watched The Core, I do recommend you watch it. It's Aaron Eckhart. It's a group of kind of scientists and other people who come together to restart the core because the core, for whatever reason, has stopped spinning. And the core needs to spin. And we find a way to dig that deep into the earth where we can go into the core. How does it work? I don't know, man. It's early 2000s, it's a dumb sci-fi movie. I really enjoyed it. Go watch it. 2004, we have two movies, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What can be said now of that movie? Everything's been said about it. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. And then we have the Dawn of the Dead remake, the one that's directed by Zack Snyder, written by James Gunn, starring a bunch of people. I remember watching this movie for the first time in the theater, and being blown away by it. I remember it had a lot of hype for it. I think most of that was because they showed the opening of the movie on TV, and I was just instantly hooked by that. And then I went to go watch it at a movie theater, and I was like, okay, yeah, this still has me. It is still to this day one of my favorite zombie movies. It is one of my favorite Zack Snyder movies, and it's also one of my favorite remakes. Because I think the Dawn of the Dead remake, it does lend itself to being one of the better remakes, especially of the Dead movies, especially of the George A. Romero movies that they've been remaking. So I'm a big fan of it. I know it caused a lot of controversy over the running zombie bit, but I think it worked for what they were trying to say and what they were trying to do in for this particular remake. So if you haven't watched it yet, or if you're on the fence about it, haven't watched it in a while, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. So the next movie, 2005, is Old Boy, and I am talking about the original one, the Korean one. Again, not much to say about it. Everything's been said about it has been said about it. The hallway scene, and just the ending, what it was, what happened, how can you interpret it, and all that. Everything that's been said about it has been said about it, and I follow in all that. And my cat's playing next to me, so if you hear little bits of it, little fidgeting and stuff like that, that's him. 2006, got 3 movies here for you. Slither, which was directed by James Gunn. It's a very kind of, we talked about the grindhouse kind of feel of Drive Angry. This kind of does have a B sci-fi horror movie spin to it. It's about these kind of parasitic aliens that come, kind of worms that come to Earth, and it infects someone. I think it infects Michael Rooker's character, and there's a bunch of people. Michael Rooker's in here, Elizabeth Banks, Nathan Fillion, and a bunch of other people as well. People you'll probably recognize, but it's very good. It's one of those just very kind of, again, B horror movies. There's a flashback, or at one point in the movie, not necessarily a flashback, but kind of like a vision, and you're just looking at it, I'm like, well, what's going on here? But it's very good. I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it yet. Then we have V for Vendetta, which was, of course, the movie based off the comic book. Natalie Portman, of course, everyone remembers Natalie Portman shaving her head in the movie, but that's very good. I watched it again for the first time the other day, and it still holds up a little bit. It still holds up. And then finally, Stay Alive. This is probably a lesser known little horror movie, a horror movie that's been forgotten. So this follows a group of teens for the answer to the mysterious death of one of their friends. They think they have to go into the world of an online video game, which is based off a true story of an ancient noblewoman known as the Blood Countess, so I should say. I remember watching this movie in a theater, and it was one of those theaters where it wasn't very, where it never really gets busy, especially at the point when we used to go. So my brother and I went, and there was like almost no one in that theater. But when a movie played, it felt like there was a bunch of people surrounding us. It's one of those movies, it's a little dated now, especially with kind of the special effects it's trying to do. But it's one of those movies where you can kind of remake it nowadays, and I don't think anyone would be upset about it. But it was kind of a little bit ahead of its time with the online video game trend that it was trying to do and say. But I really like Stay Alive. It's just one of those like nice little late 2000s horror movies that, again, I think everyone's kind of forgotten about. I actually saw it on TV. I caught like the last half hour of the movie on TV the other day, and I was like, oh, that's right, I'll watch this. And I remember liking it, and I did kind of like the ending bit of it as well. But there you go. Okay, 2007. 2 movies here for you guys. The Host, which of course everyone's re-falling in love with because of the whole, let's go watch South Korean cinema again. But The Host, very, very good. I remember watching it in theaters. I think it was at the Chicago International Film Festival. Yes, it was at the Chicago International Film Festival. It was a very late showing, but it was one of those movies where I felt myself going to sleep because, again, it was a late showing and it was after school. But I it was just so good that I could not fall asleep to it. So it's just one of those, just, yeah, that's my story about The Host, watching it for the first time. And then there was 300. Everyone talked about 300 when it came out, you know, whether you liked it or not, whether you thought that the abs were real or not, whether you really love the action. Everyone, you know, was saying this is Sparta, you know, the meme's still out there in the world. What else can you say about 300? It's one of those just movies where it's like you could turn your brain off and just really go ahead and watch it. 2008, only got one movie. It's called Flashpoint. It's actually the kind of American title of the movie. I believe it's the American title of the movie. It's a movie with Donnie Yen. It's very, very good. If you're a huge Donnie Yen fan, I highly recommend. This is the movie he did after SPL, or it was, as it was called here in America, Killzone. Very, very good. Donnie Yen plays a detective, and he's going after a big kind of crime boss played by Colin Chow. The action in this thing is phenomenal. It's very, very good. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. It's Donnie Yen. If you're a big fan of Donnie Yen and you haven't watched this movie, go watch it. 2009, Watchmen. Now, I read Watchmen before the movie came out. I had read all of Watchmen at that point, and it was one of those comic book, it was one of those graphic novels where it was very dense for me, and I had to go back and reread a lot of it before I even finished it, just so I can get the grasp of everything that was going on. And then I watched the movie, and it was one of those, I think Watchmen was one of those movies. It was the first time where I kind of was talking to my friends about it, and it was one of those movies where we all kind of went around and we kind of had this very big discussion about it. And it was one of those movies I remember just watching in the theater and just like thinking about it and hearing everyone's opinion coming out of the theater, and then going to school the next day to watch it because I went to the midnight showing of it, and then went to school on Friday and just talked about it with everyone who had also went to go watch it at midnight, or, you know, the following Monday. It was one of those first movies where I went around and talked to people, and it was and we just talked about it. And then we talked about the graphic novel, and we just talked about how bad it was or how good it was, or, you know, I can't believe they did this and that. It was one of those movies where I remember having this deep discussion about it. It was one of those first movies that I've ever had a deep discussion about it, especially with my friends. That is the only thing I remember that I really liked about the movie, was that. And of course, Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach. But the movie itself, it was, I don't know. It was fine. It's not good. It's fine. It's okay. It's not even fine. It's okay. Would I watch it again? Probably not. Probably not. Maybe not now. Maybe I'll go back and watch it now. Who knows? Maybe I'll like it more. Probably not, but who knows? Probably not. Let's go. Let's just move on. 2010, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And this is the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This is the Swedish version. This is the movie. This is the version with Noomi Rapace in it. This was the kind of real first. This began. Besides the Donnie Yen movies, this began my love for foreign movies, especially kind of the foreign dramas. I had not read the book at this point. I actually read the book after the fact. I actually read the book before the American remake. Because I heard the American remake was going to be closer to the book. They do change some things from the book, and even in the Swedish version and from the American version. So the two versions are very different from each other, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed that fact. But the Swedish version for me is probably the better version, and that's kind of, it's really, it's really rare to do that, to pick, something over a David Fincher movie, but I'm doing it. All right, let's move on to 2011. I got two movies for you guys. I have Battle Los Angeles, which I know gets a lot of flack. I know it's not a good movie, but I really enjoyed it. I don't know. I kind of like that kind of Black Hawk Down-ish alien invasion feel. I don't know. I just really liked it when I watched it for the first time. And then there was Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch. Zack Snyder. I was praising you a little bit ago with Dawn of the Dead, and then you had to go and make Sucker Punch. This, I think, proved to everyone, if it hadn't proven it already, that Zack Snyder was much more of a visuals director instead of a story director. Because the visuals in Sucker Punch, the action scenes in Sucker Punch, really, really good. Unfortunately, it's everything in between those action scenes that really kind of lulls and really kind of drags the movie down. It's just it was bad. It was not good. It was not good whatsoever. All right, let's move. I don't want to drag too much on the crappy movies. 2012, I got two movies here. John Carter. Oh, John Carter. What happened? Now, the reason I bring John Carter up is because John Carter itself is an okay movie. It is an okay movie, but I think John Carter is, at least up until that point, one of Disney's what ifs. It was one of Disney's many missteps. Because John Carter was one of those movies. The movie itself is, of course, based off the books, and John Carter himself, you know, the book series of John Carter that he appears in, they were the template for every sci-fi movie, every fantasy movie that we ever seen. Star Wars itself was also kind of inspired by the John Carter books. And for John Carter to come out, I don't know, maybe it was just sci-fi fatigue. I don't know, maybe people were just like, oh, we've seen all of this already. But John Carter itself should have been a franchise starter for Disney. And for whatever reason, Disney was like, nope. The marketing for John Carter was bad. I remember specifically the Super Bowl spot for John Carter, where it didn't show anything of the movie. And I remember thinking at that point, and I still remember to this day, that the Super Bowl spot for John Carter should have been a hell of a lot more. And this was the grandest spot for people to see John Carter. And you messed it up. How do you mess up a movie that I'm sure cost you a lot? Had a great director. I think it was Brad Bird who directed John. I could be wrong about that. But it was one of those directors who was in the Disney house. And they finally gave him a chance, and they were like, no, that's okay. How do you do that? Well, John Carter, of all people. And of course, no one's tried to remake John Carter movies because everyone's going to remember how bad the movie did at the box office. Again, the movie itself, it's okay. It's not great. Granted, it's just an okay movie, but still, at that point, how did Disney mess this up? And they did. But the next movie in 2012 is The Raid Redemption. As it was called here in America, it was called The Raid Redemption. Everyone else, it was pretty much called The Raid. One of the great, probably best action movies of the decade, of that year, of a long time. And to this day, it's still one of the best action movies. I actually watched it the other day just for the fun of it. It's still to this day very good. It's a very simple concept. It is. But at the same time, the action scenes, the fight sequences, mind-blowing. Awesome. So there you go. Let's move on. 2013, we have G.I. Joe Retaliation. I know a lot of people hated the first G.I. Joe. I was one of them. But I really liked Retaliation. It was a kind of nice, soft reboot to everything. Movie itself, again, just okay. But way better than the first G.I. Joe. I know people just still had that hate for it, and they just didn't really like Retaliation. That the mountain sequence alone was worth the price of admission for me, honestly. But there you go. 2014, we have quite a few movies in 2014. We have 300: Rise of an Empire. It was the sequel, of course, to 300. All these years later, I really enjoyed it. I kind of just liked, I guess I just really liked the style of it out of anything. But it was very good. Eva Green's in the movie. Eva Green, however you want to say her first name, playing a bad guy. Very good bad guy at that. So there was that. Need for Speed, a movie based off the video game. This is a movie I had no expectations for. None whatsoever. I wasn't the biggest Need for Speed video game fan either, so I had no expectations. I wanted to go watch it because it was a Need for Speed movie, so I was okay. And I really ended up enjoying it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a nice, just dumb fun action movie that you can just go and watch and have fun with it. If you do that, then you'll probably really like Need for Speed. The next one is Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel. I took me a while to get into Wes Anderson, but at this point with the Grand Budapest Hotel, I think the first one I really got into was Moonrise Kingdom. I think that might have been, no, actually, no. The first one that I watched from Wes Anderson was Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I'm sure we'll talk about on this list. I forgot what month it came out, but that was the first Wes Anderson movie I watched, and then it was Moonrise Kingdom, and then it was this, and I really liked Grand Budapest Hotel. I again, it just took me a while to get into Wes Anderson films, but I really liked Grand Budapest Hotel. That it was funny. That it was very quirky. It's very quirky comedy. It's not for everyone. Obviously, Wes Anderson is not for everyone, but apparently it's for me because I really enjoyed this movie. And the last movie in 2014 is I'm gonna mispronounce his name. Jodorowsky's Dune. Now this is a documentary, and I know it's like, whoa, a documentary? Yes, documentary. This is the documentary about the director. I'm not gonna mispronounce his last name again, but this is a documentary done by a film crew who found out that there was going to be another version of Dune, and of course Dune, the big 80s sci-fi movie. The people over at Downright Annoyed with Movies, they did a episode about Dune, so we want to go check that out. Highly recommend. Downright Nerdy and Bored and Annoyed, very good people. They didn't tell me to shout them out. I don't even know if they're listening to this, but if they are, there's your shout out. Not that they wanted me to do a shout out, but they have the series over on their YouTube channels where they talk about movies, and they did one on Dune, and it was very, very cool to listen to. But Dune itself, but this documentary, I should say, the documentary was about the version of Dune that they were going to make before the Dune that we got. And it's a very in-depth interview with the director who was, I think it was still, he was still alive at this point. I don't know if he's still living with us or still with us. But it was with him, it was with the production designers, with the art directors, with everyone that was involved in that movie that was still alive. They brought in everything they'd done. They had the old storyboards. They would every now and then put the script that they were going to shoot with on screen. It's a very in-depth look at that, and it's very, very fun and informal. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of that Dune. What we could have gotten maybe would have been better. I don't know, but it's very, very good documentary. So it's Jodorowsky's Dune. So let's move on to 2015. I only got one movie in 2015, and that's It Follows. This was a movie that got a great reception in the film festival crowd, and then when it finally came out in theaters, it was one of those weird things because it came out in theaters very, very slowly. I remember it coming out very, very slowly because I remember hearing about it at the film festivals and the film festival circuit, got very, very good reception, and then when it came down to coming out in theaters, it came out in one theater here in Chicago for like a month. And then it came out in another theater in Chicago, a couple theaters, I should say, in Chicago for like a few months after that. And then it came out everywhere else in a movie theater like 3 months afterwards. So it was one of those weird movies that got a slow, wide release. But it's one of those movies that, so in case you don't know what it is, it's a movie that follows a girl played by Minka Monroe. I think this was her breakout role. Yeah, I think this is her breakout role. And it's her. She goes out on this seemingly very nice date with this guy that she just met, or she's known for a little bit, and they end up sleeping together. And unbeknownst to her, she gets this mysterious, I don't want to say infection because it's not like a body thing. Well, I guess it's a kind of body thing if you really want to dig deep into it, but it's something that follows her. Obviously, it follows. So when you sleep with someone who has been infected by, let's just say, curse, been infected by this curse, something follows you. It could be anybody, it can be anything, or not anything, but it can be anybody that you know, or maybe you do know, or you don't know, and it just follows you. It just meticulously just follows you like an old school, slasher. It follows you like Jason. He just walks around. It just walks around. And she's just kind of just going crazy. And then, she gets her friends involved with it. It's one of those movies, even when I watched it for the first time, I understood what it was. And there's been a lot of essays written about, a lot of opinion pieces written about it, and it's still one of those movies that gets talked about today, because it is a very influential movie. This is really, It Follows was kind of like the big boom for, or kind of the fire starter, you could say, for independent horror movies. Because after It Follows came out, that's where at least I started to notice. I'm pretty sure something else came before It Follows, but this is when I started to notice that a lot of big independent horror movies were given a bigger spotlight because of It Follows, because it took the chance, because it was done on such a low budget, because it was saying something while also being a horror movie. And I just really appreciated that. And I think I want to say that's when I started noticing kind of the big budget, kind of like smaller budget independent movies getting a bigger spotlight and coming out in theaters a lot more quicker now. And that's when I started noticing. I could be wrong about that, but It Follows, it's a very good movie. I'm sure, obviously you and me talking about it, you kind of know that, yes, it is kind of a, you have sex, they're going to have this, thing follow you for the rest of your life. And they are teenagers in the movie, and the characters are teenagers anyway in the movie. And it's a very smart movie. And it's somewhat unforgiving in some of the aspects of some of the characters, but go watch it. Highly recommend it. 2016, we have Zootopia, of course, Disney's big animation movie. The sloths, everyone remembers the sloths. I remember the sloths. I still use the sloths as memes and gifts to a bunch of people. So there's that. And then 10 Cloverfield Lane. This was, of course, the long-awaited sequel to Cloverfield, even though it wasn't originally supposed to be a sequel to Cloverfield. It was really originally kind of its own thing, and then Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams got their hands on it, and they're like, you know what, we're gonna keep it as it is, as it was, and then the final act we're gonna connect it to the Cloverfield universe. But this is really cool. We didn't know too much about it. We know it's about these people in a underground kind of cellar, bunker, whatever you want to call it, with something horrible going on, in the outside world, and we don't know what's going on until the final act of the movie, where we finally get out and you're like, oh, it's not, oh, no, there it is. Yeah, there, okay. Giant monster. Okay. It's very good. I highly recommend it. Even if you don't like the last minute sci-fi twist and how it connects to the Cloverfield universe at the end, John Gallagher Jr., John Goodman, Mary Elizabeth Winstead together for pretty much, that's it. It's really just them for the whole movie. Those three just put on a showcase, and it's awesome. 2017, I have 4 movies here for you guys. I have Headshot, which was done by some of the guys from the Raid movies and the Raid 2. Need I say more? There's that. It does take a little bit to get to what it's trying to do and to the action stuff, but it's worth it. Then there's Power Rangers, the movie Power Rangers. Look, I grew up with Power Rangers. As a kid, I remember watching them. I remember owning toys. I remember owning some of the movies. I remember watching Power Rangers, the first movie, in theaters. I was a big Power Rangers fan. And when I found out they were redoing Power Rangers on the big screen, I wanted to go watch it. I don't care how bad it was. I don't care, if it was just going to be just a disappointment and made me look back at my childhood and be like, what the hell was I thinking? No, I really enjoyed Power Rangers. I really liked it. I don't care how, I don't care what anyone thinks about me saying that. I really liked Power Rangers. I did. And you know that I geeked out when the Power Rangers theme started playing in the movie. Because it does. It plays in the movie. And I remember sitting there, and I remember I was eating it up, man. I ate it up so much. And there was a few people in my theater that ate it up too, but I ate it up so much. Look, all the bad things about this movie, I don't care. I honestly do not care. I loved Power Rangers, and I am unafraid, and you can bash me all you want. I don't care. I love Power Rangers. So let's move on. Did I say Kong Skull Island? No, I don't think I said Kong Skull Island. Kong Skull Island. I really liked Kong Skull Island. So everyone remembers, of course, the Peter Jackson King Kong. I think we're still watching it, really, to be honest. But everyone remembers that, and I was, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I liked some of it. I liked when King Kong showed up and was fighting T-Rexes. That's it. That's the only thing I like about the Peter Jackson King Kong movie. But Kong Skull Island, I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I remember going to the theater with my family and just eating it up, man. It was really good. And that movie is filled to the brim with who's who. Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, John Goodman, Corey Hawkins, who else is in there? John C. Reilly, just a bunch of, Shea Wingham is in there too. He plays a really cool character. Toby Kibble's in there, sort of. I just really, really liked it. I thought it was really cool. I loved how King Kong was he was just walking around being king, and then people just come and start blowing up his island. He's like, you know what? No, I'm not having that. I'm gonna destroy you guys, and then have you walk around my island and these weird ass creatures that come up and try to kill you. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really good. Okay, that's fine. And of course, it connects to the Godzilla movie, and now we have Godzilla versus Kong coming out. Maybe, we don't know if it's coming out or not, but it's coming out. And finally, the last movie, 2017, Logan. And what more can be said about Logan? It is a great comic book movie. It is a great ending to Hugh Jackman's Logan, Wolverine. Laura King? Is that, am I missing? Daphne King. I put her character and I put her character name and her real last name together. Daphne King, who plays Laura, or X-23, if you want to get all, comic booky. In the movie is great. A nice, standout performance by her. I really like this movie, man. I don't know what to say. I remember walking out of the theater for the first time, just being crushed and just, wanting to go watch it again immediately. It was so good. I really loved Logan. I thought it was awesome. I thought, there was a lot of, bashing of Hugh Jackman and being like, oh, okay, Hugh Jackman's finally done playing Logan. They could finally reboot the character. Like, no, man, he poured his heart and soul into that character. And he wasn't originally supposed to play Wolverine. It was supposed to be Dougray Scott. And then they found Hugh Jackman a week before filming started. But I really liked it, man. That final scene of him, when he's dying, spoiler, I guess, I don't know. But just that final scene of him and Daphne King together, it was great. It was awesome. Manly tears were shed. Tears, just in general, were shed. All right, so let's move on to the final year of this monthly rewind of March 2018. And we have two movies. We have Ready Player One, which I remember reading the book before the movie came out. I actually read the book fairly quickly before the movie came out. I was like, I'm gonna give myself enough time to read it before the movie comes out. I read that thing so fast. I don't think I've only read books from cover to cover fairly quickly within the span of a few days. Very rarely. It happens very rarely when I read a book from cover to cover, especially when I was at school, because I was reading that on top of all my schoolwork at that point. But it was very rare for me to read a book from cover to cover in just a few days, because it just doesn't really happen that much, especially when I was at school. But I did that thing for Ready Player One tremendously. I loved the book. I thought the book was great. And then I went to go out to watch the movie, and I thought this was really good. This was very ambitious. I didn't think they'd be able to pull it off, but they did. They changed, some things from the book to the movie, which is fine, which is fair. The Shining scene in the movie, which was not in the book, was a big difference, but it was one that really made the movie stand out. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about the movie. The movie's very good. I liked it. I thought it was great. Is it as good as the book? I don't know. They're two very different things, which is very good. And finally, The Strangers Pray at Night, which is a sequel to The Strangers. I really like this movie. This is a movie that you can tell was inspired by 80s horror movies. It has that 80s horror movie feel to it. It takes the isolation angle, in this case, the first one was on a house. This one is in a kind of a mobile trailer home kind of a space. It takes the three strangers and gives them, more room to play with. It follows a family, a bigger family this time, instead of just, a couple. It's very good. I really liked it. You know, I think it was very well done. I think the pool scene is probably the highlight of the movie for me, and I think probably for some other ones, for some other people. I would recommend this movie a lot. Strangers Parade at Night, very, very good. It's very breezy, moves by very fast. I mean, not fast enough where, you know, it just, you don't get to know the characters. You get to know the characters, and then once everything starts, it just moves pretty fast. Very breezy movie. Highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. If you haven't watched the first Strangers, I guess you could watch them back to back. They're two very different movies, though, which is good. You know, sequel-wise, it's very, very different. But yeah, there you go. All right, that's it. That is your monthly rewind. A very late monthly rewind for February and March. I will do April. I will be releasing the April monthly rewind in not soon, but soonish. It will come out in April. How about that? It will come out in April. But as for when, I don't know. Soon. I'll just say soon because, you know, I got nothing else to do. So there is that. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your quarantine. Hopefully you guys haven't gone crazy yet. But thank you for listening to the monthly rewind of March or February and March. Sorry for that. I will, again, be releasing the monthly rewind for April in April and not waiting months after it's over. But thank you guys so much for listening. Let me know what your monthly rewinds look like. And yeah, that's it. So you guys know what to do. Everything you guys need in the description / show notes area. Everything you need to follow, like, subscribe, review, all that stuff is down there. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will catch you guys next time.